The launch of Men of War 2 is in less than 2 weeks from today. In the lead up to the release, the developers are still actively putting out new information and dev blogs about the game. I figured this one about single player would specifically appeal to a lot of people, so let's just dive right on in. Actually, before we do, I should mention that according to the developers themselves, every bit of single player content in Mode 2 is also playable in co-op with up to 5 players. Are you a big co-op fan? Is co-op important to you in games like this, or do you just want to play by yourself in single player? Let me know down in the comments because I'm kind of curious to see what you guys think about co-op in games like Men of War 2. Now, let's talk about the 3 story campaigns that'll come with Mode 2 at launch. In the Soviet campaign, Thwarted Blitzkrieg, you play during what the developers call the most challenging period for the defenders on the Eastern Front. This appears to be during the opening stages of Operation Barbarossa, with the Battle of Brody specifically being mentioned. If the developers mostly stick to a historical accurate portrayal, this could actually be a very interesting setting. The Soviets, as they say here, were very disorganized and demoralized. However, the Germans had to be slowed down, if not at least temporarily halted, to prevent a complete collapse of the Soviet front lines. The American campaign, called the Falaise Pocket, follows Americans in France in August 1944. The Allied goal there was to try and trap as many Germans as possible in a large, decisive encirclement. Finally, the German campaign, called On Their Own Soil, as the title implies, has you play as the Germans in the final days of the war inside Germany. Whether this is only against the Soviets or only against the Americans, or maybe against both, isn't really specified. Now, besides these 3 story campaigns, there are 2 historical campaigns as well that are dedicated to specific operations from World War II. The Soviet Bagration campaign is focused around the liberation of Minsk and the lead up to it during the Belarusian offensive in June and July of 1944, and the American Overlord campaign is both about the battles in Normandy and the liberation of Paris in 1944. Both of these historical campaigns come with 7 missions, 6 so-called battalions to pick from, as well as a research or tech tree. Completing missions lets you unlock new units and battalions to use, and these battalions can be customized within historical constraints, so there is some replayability depending on your battalion, unit, and research order choices. Men of War 2 hosted some open beta tests in which you could check out 3 standalone missions. 3 more have been added, making a total of 6 standalone missions available at launch, assuming that there are 3 factions, that each faction gets 2 of these missions playable from their perspective. However, there is still more to discuss. The raid mode, for example, and no, this is not an advertisement for Raid Shadow Legends. This is a dynamic campaign consisting of 16 missions with its own technology tree, which includes all available units, I'm assuming of a certain faction, and 21 battalions. Based on the example picture here, you can decide the path to take in researching certain units, and thus create different playthroughs depending on your choices of what units to unlock and in what order. Furthermore, the Conquest game mode, which though similarly named to a mode in Gates of Hell, seems to be a little bit more in depth, at least the way it is explained here. You choose whether you want to fight as the Soviets or the Germans on the Eastern Front, as the Americans or the Germans on the Western Front. Then you are tasked with defending and attacking areas on the map by moving divisions around this map, obviously each with certain strengths and weaknesses. It sounds somewhat similar to Gates of Hell, though with what appears to be a little bit more variety in units. Whereas in Gates of Hell, you just have one sort of big army that you move forward or backward depending on whether you win or lose. Here, from what I can understand, we'll have multiple divisions on the map doing different things at once. Some final things to finish out this video about the devblog. In Mode 2, each player in co-op will have their own reinforcement menu, something that should prevent those frustrating moments I've had in Assault Squad or Gates of Hell, where one player would try to call on new reinforcements. They would all be given to the player with the least units in battle, just causing all sorts of frustrating and annoying moments. Basically, in Mode 2, whatever you call in will actually be yours right from the moment they enter the battlefield. The developers claim they have greatly improved the AI's capacity to provide you with hopefully a more challenging opponent if you choose, as you can select the AI difficulty in every mode they are available in. Now, personally, I am always down for higher skilled AI, as long as they can provide more difficulty without blatantly cheating in the form of, say, getting extra resources resources that allowed him to deploy an absurd amount more forces than I as a player myself can. Finally, maps will adjust in scale and size according to the number of players in the session, though I do think it would be cool to have a little bit more control over this yourself. Imagine having 5 players fighting an AI on a map size really meant for 1 player, or 1 player having to deal with a huge map meant for 5 players. With what we've learned from the previous devblogs regarding updated graphics and the new realism mode, and now this, I honestly cannot wait to check out some of these new single player and co-op modes in Men of War 2, and I think they've actually come a very long way from those first open betas, at least from what we can see in these devblogs. With that said, what do you think? Are you going to be jumping into some of the story or historical campaigns first, or are you going straight into the raid or conquest modes? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.